Illegal now, but normal to eat in the 1920s. What if your great-grandparents' favorite meals could land you in jail today? From radioactive snacks to outlawed meats, the 1920s dinner table was filled with foods we'd never dare eat now. Let's uncover 20 once-everyday dishes that time left behind. Raw milk. Do you remember when milk came with a layer of cream on top and a little bit of risk in every pour? Back in the 1920s, raw milk was a part of daily life for millions of Americans, especially in the countryside. It wasn't some boutique health trend. It was the norm, pulled warm from the cow and poured straight into pitchers without a second thought. Most rural families either tended their own livestock or bought milk from a neighbor down the road, straining it through cloth to catch debris and placing it in the coolest part of the cellar if they were lucky enough to have one. But as comforting as those memories may seem, there was danger hidden in that familiar white liquid. Long before refrigeration was common, raw milk was linked to outbreaks of deadly diseases like tuberculosis, typhoid, and brucellosis. Urban populations began to suffer the consequences first, prompting public health officials to push for a safer solution. That solution was pasteurization, heating milk just enough to kill harmful bacteria. Slowly but surely, it became the law of the land. By mid-century, pasteurized milk was the standard across most of the U.S., forever changing how America drank its most basic staple, lard. Golden crusts, sizzling skillets, and the unmistakable aroma of something rich and savory frying on the stove. That was the heartbeat of an American kitchen in the 1920s. Lard wasn't just an ingredient. It was the foundation of daily cooking, scooped from a dented tin beside the fire and worked into nearly every meal without a second thought. Born from backyard hog butchering and prized for its versatility, lard was treasured not for novelty, but for necessity. It made food taste like home: deep-fried chicken, flaky pie crusts, and biscuits that practically melted in your mouth. For generations, it was the unspoken hero behind family recipes, valued for its high smoke point, long shelf life, and rich flavor. Cooks didn't measure it in grams, they measured it in memory. But as the science of nutrition evolved, that once beloved fat fell under scrutiny. Saturated fat became a target, and newer, healthier alternatives like vegetable shortening entered the scene. By the 1970s, lard had all but disappeared from most pantries, replaced by products that promised longevity but sacrificed tradition. What was once a cornerstone of American cooking became a casualty of changing health trends and shifting culinary values. Canned tuna. Stacked on pantry shelves across America, those gleaming cans of tuna once promised simplicity, a fast meal, a touch of protein, and a familiar flavor that stretched from brown bag lunches to bubbling casseroles at family potlucks. For much of the 20th century, it was the humble hero of home cooking, affordable, versatile, and endlessly dependable. But behind that quiet convenience was a hidden concern few recognized at the time. In the 1960s, long before food labeling became a public priority, canned tuna was found to contain trace amounts of mercury, a naturally occurring element that, in elevated levels, can affect human health. The risk wasn't immediate, which made it easy to overlook. People went about their lives, packing tuna sandwiches and stirring up creamy casseroles, unaware that regular consumption might carry long-term effects. As scientific understanding deepened, researchers identified a connection between high levels of mercury and potential neurological impacts, especially for young children and pregnant women. The findings led to updated safety standards. By the 1970s, the FDA implemented stricter limits on mercury levels in seafood, reshaping public perception of what had once been a carefree kitchen staple. Today, canned tuna still has a place at the table, but now with greater awareness and guidance in tow. Were any of these still common in your household, even after they were considered unsafe? Smoking while eating. Was there ever a time when a steak dinner and a cigarette were just part of the same picture? In the 1970s, it wasn't just common, it was woven into everyday life. Ashtrays sat beside salt shakers in every booth. Smoke drifted above casseroles and chicken-fried steaks like part of the atmosphere. Whether in a diner, a steakhouse, or someone's kitchen, it often accompanied the clink of silverware without a second thought. Back then, advertising didn't raise red flags. It offered reassurance. Images of doctors, movie stars, and even cartoon mascots suggested that smoking was more than acceptable. It was fashionable. Mealtime became a ritual, a hearty dish, a sip of coffee, and often a cigarette to follow. Public perception began to shift as research into secondhand smoke became harder to ignore. Gradually, restaurant by restaurant, city by city, the practice faded. By the early 2000s, indoor smoking had become a memory rather than a norm. Today, it's almost surreal to imagine, a reminder of how quickly culture can evolve and how something once seen as routine can become nearly unthinkable in just a generation. Jell-O. Back in the day, no birthday party or church basement potluck felt complete without that jiggly, jewel-toned dessert wobbling proudly on the table. Jell-O wasn't just a treat, it was a performance. Whether layered like a neon parfait or molded into shapes only a 1980s cookbook could dream up, it added color and cheer to gatherings of all kinds. And let's be honest, half the fun was watching it wiggle more than actually eating it. But beneath the rainbow surface was something not everyone gave much thought to: the color itself. Those vibrant reds, sunny yellows, and cool blues didn't come from fruit. They came from synthetic dyes commonly used in foods at the time. Some of these, like red number 3, were later reviewed in scientific studies that raised health-related questions. Others, such as yellow number 5 and blue number 1, also became part of ongoing discussions around food safety and children's sensitivity to artificial coloring. As public interest in food labeling grew, regulations began to evolve. Some countries phased out certain additives, and in the US, clearer ingredient disclosures were introduced by the late 1990s. Still, Jell-O never quite left the party, because when nostalgia calls, even a bowl of brightly colored gelatin can still earn a spot on the table. Cigarette candy. There was a time when childhood felt simpler, when a trip to the corner store with a few coins in hand could buy not just candy, but a feeling of grown-up curiosity. Nestled between bubble gum and licorice sat a curious treat. Cigarette candy, candy sticks made to mimic adult habits. Slim, powdery white, and often packaged with playful designs that mirrored grown-up branding, these sweets had red-tipped ends to resemble embers, turning playgrounds into make-believe scenes where kids copied the adults they admired in movies or at home. While these candies contained no tobacco, just sugar and corn syrup, their message lingered. Marketed with phrases like, "just like grown-ups," they quietly wove adult imagery into childhood play. There was no official partnership between candy makers and tobacco brands, but the resemblance was unmistakable. As public awareness grew around the health risks of smoking, so did concern over these innocent-seeming sweets. Critics argued that even indirect exposure could shape attitudes toward harmful behaviors. Eventually, growing pressure led to bans in multiple countries. Still, for many, these treats remain a bittersweet memory, an artifact of a time when the line between childhood play and cultural influence was far more blurred. Harmful butter substitutes. Who knew fake butter could carry so many surprises? During the lean years of the early 20th century, when real dairy was often too expensive or quick to spoil, many American households turned to margarine as a substitute. Though substitute might have been a stretch. Early margarine didn't come in the familiar golden sticks we know today. It was often a blend of various fats and oils, including whale fat or cottonseed oil, and relied on artificial coloring agents to imitate butter's rich hue. Some of these early dyes were later found to be questionable by modern safety standards. Despite its drawbacks, margarine had its appeal. It was shelf-stable, affordable, and easy to produce in large quantities. Wartime shortages only boosted its popularity, and soon it became a common sight in school cafeterias and ration-era cookbooks across the country. As nutritional science progressed, experts began to take a closer look at what was being spread on toast. By the mid-20th century, concerns over ingredient quality and food safety prompted new regulations. The FDA stepped in to ban problematic additives and enforce clearer labeling, marking a shift toward better oversight and safer standards in processed foods. Saccharin. By the time disco ruled the airwaves and avocado-colored appliances filled American kitchens, saccharin had quietly claimed its place as the unsung hero of the diet revolution. Tiny metallic packets of this no-calorie sweetener sat beside every sugar bowl, offering a promise that felt almost too good to be true: sweetness without guilt. For calorie-conscious coffee drinkers and dieters eager to keep dessert on the table, it became second nature to reach for saccharin instead of sugar. Although it had existed since the 19th century, saccharin surged in popularity during the mid-20th century, aligning perfectly with a growing national focus on low-fat, low-calorie lifestyles. People stirred it into coffee, sprinkled it on fruit, and embraced it as a shortcut to a healthier diet. In the early 1970s, however, public perception shifted when laboratory studies involving high-dose exposure in animals raised questions about its long-term safety. The results sparked debate and led to temporary warning labels, though later reviews and broader research cast doubt on the initial concerns. Saccharin never fully disappeared. While newer sweeteners eventually took the spotlight, it still remains available today, quietly echoing an era when Americans were just beginning to decode nutrition labels in their quest for guilt-free sweetness. Lead-Soldered Cans. Before food safety became a science rather than just a hope, many canned goods came with a hidden risk that couldn't be tasted, but was very real. In the early to mid-20th century, lead-soldered cans lined pantry shelves across America. They appeared harmless, wrapped in cheerful paper labels and promising long shelf life. But inside, the seams that held the metal together were often sealed with lead. At the time, lead was considered practical. It created strong seals, resisted corrosion, and preserved food for extended periods, ideal for household storage and military rations alike. Manufacturers didn't yet grasp the long-term implications, and consumers had little reason to question what kept their soup or peaches safe. The issue? Over time, especially with acidic foods like tomatoes or fruit, lead could leach into the contents, particularly if the can was dented or poorly sealed. What seemed like progress in food preservation carried hidden risks. It took years of study and evolving health research to fully understand the impact. Today, lead-soldered cans are banned under modern food safety regulations, but for decades, millions of households unknowingly encountered a relic of the past, one that reflected the growing pains of progress in our pursuit of convenience. Home-canned meats. How many childhood kitchens once held shelves lined with glass jars, proudly filled, carefully sealed, and packed with homemade comfort? In the 1920s and 30s, home-canned meats were not just a culinary habit. They were a lifeline for families weathering hard times. With refrigeration still a luxury and every scrap of food precious, resourceful homemakers turned to preservation methods passed down through generations. Cuts of pork, beef, and chicken were simmered gently, packed into reused jars, and sealed with wax or rudimentary lids, creating meals that could last for months. These jars, often tucked away in cool basements or root cellars, offered not only nourishment, but also reassurance in uncertain times. However, beneath the practicality lay a quiet risk. Without pressure canners, the low-acid environment of meat could become a breeding ground for dangerous bacteria like Clostridium botulinum, a seemingly wholesome jar of stew might harbor invisible threats. As scientific understanding of foodborne illness advanced, the government introduced new safety guidelines in the mid-20th century. Pressure cookers became household essentials, and regulations reshaped the once common tradition. Today, while modern kitchens lean on freezers and prepackaged meals, the legacy of home-canned meats still lingers in dusty recipe boxes and family stories, echoes of an era when survival was sealed one jar at a time. Enjoyed the trip down memory lane? Show us some love with a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the past. Potassium bromate in bread. Some folks joked that the bread could bounce if you dropped it, and honestly, they weren't far off. In the 1980s, store-bought loaves were incredibly soft, perfectly risen, and surprisingly springy. Behind that doughy perfection was a quiet ingredient at work: potassium bromate. Added during the mixing process, it helped strengthen gluten and gave bread the lofty, uniform texture that became an American staple. As food science advanced, researchers began examining how certain baking additives behaved under heat. In the case of potassium bromate, questions arose around what could remain in the bread if it wasn't baked thoroughly. Laboratory studies using high-dose testing in animals prompted concern over potential health implications, especially involving organ tissues. Countries like the UK, Canada, and Japan responded by banning or strictly regulating its use. In the US, regulatory agencies advised caution, and while potassium bromate wasn't officially banned, many commercial bakeries voluntarily phased it out. Others continued using it more quietly. Today, the story of potassium bromate speaks to how something as ordinary as sandwich bread can raise deeper questions about food safety, regulatory action, and the way consumer knowledge shapes industry standards. That soft, golden slice. It wasn't just a comfort food. It reflected the complexities behind the modern kitchen. Hidden organ meats. Ever bite into a hot dog and wonder what exactly was in it? In the 1970s, a trip to the meat counter came with more variety than many shoppers realized. While people asked for sausage, ground beef, or cold cuts, it wasn't unusual for those products to include nutrient-rich organ meats, like liver, heart, or tongue. This wasn't a corporate secret. It was a reflection of long-standing culinary traditions rooted in whole animal cooking. For generations, especially in working-class homes, organ meats were prized for their nutritional value and affordability. They were rich in iron, vitamins, and protein, ideal for stretching meals and reducing waste. Meat processors embraced this approach, helping to make the most of every animal and meet rising demand during economically challenging times. At the time, many households were familiar with dishes like liver and onions or beef stew made with heart or tripe. Still, as processed meats became more convenient and uniform, the exact ingredients weren't always top of mind. That began to change as consumer awareness grew. By the 1980s, food labeling laws became more detailed, requiring transparency in ingredient lists. Slowly, processed meat products evolved, and organ meats became less common on store shelves. What remains is a memory of bologna sandwiches and hearty meals, built from a tradition that valued thrift, nutrition, and using every part of the animal. Lead paint. Lead-based paint once added brilliant color and shine to food packaging, but at a hidden cost. In the mid-20th century, it was commonly used on everything from canned vegetables to cereal boxes, prized for its vibrant pigments and durability. Grocery shelves gleamed with bold reds, yellows, and greens, catching shoppers' eyes while quietly exposing them to potential harm. Most families had no idea that acidic foods like tomatoes could interact with the painted lining, causing trace amounts of lead to leach into the food. At the time, safety standards lagged behind industry trends, and even early scientific warnings were slow to spark change. As awareness of Lee's cumulative health risks grew, particularly its impact on brain development and organ function, So did the pressure to regulate. By the late 1970s, lead-based paint was banned from food packaging in the US, a major step towards safer consumer goods. Today, those brightly labeled cans from decades past serve not just as a memory of colorful marketing, but as a clear example of how innovation without oversight can come at a price. Seafood. Sunday fish fries and tuna casseroles were once seen as wholesome American staples, and for good reason. During the 1960s and early 70s, seafood held a cherished place on family tables as a lean, protein-rich option. But beneath the golden crusts and flaky fillets, something unexpected was gradually becoming a concern: mercury. As industrial pollution flowed into rivers and oceans, mercury began to accumulate in marine ecosystems, making its way up the food chain and into some of the fish people relied on most. At the time, awareness was low, and food safety regulations were still catching up to environmental science. Over time, researchers began to understand that mercury could build up in the human body, particularly in those who consumed seafood frequently. Studies pointed to potential health impacts, especially for developing children and pregnant women. This led to increased concern about certain types of fish with higher mercury concentrations. By the mid-1970s, regulatory agencies had begun monitoring mercury levels in seafood more closely and setting safety limits to help protect public health. For many families, the change came quietly, but it marked a pivotal shift in how Americans thought about food, environment, and the unseen connections between them. Ambergris. It wasn't sugar or spice that gave certain 1920s desserts their unique allure. It was something far more mysterious, and frankly, quite unusual. Ambergris, a waxy substance formed in the digestive system of sperm whales, once made its way from the ocean to high society kitchens in Europe and America. Despite its unglamorous origin, ambergris was valued at the time for its distinct aroma and subtle, earthy flavor. A small amount could transform custards, puddings, and jellies into rare delicacies. In elite culinary circles, its use reflected a fascination with rarity and extravagance, often more about status than taste. Chefs of the era approached it with great care, grating or infusing it delicately into desserts that crowned lavish meals. But such indulgence carried a hidden cost. Ambergris, sourced from a species now protected under international conservation laws, gradually fell out of favor as awareness of whale endangerment grew. By the mid-20th century, shifting ethics and legal protections placed it firmly in the past. Today, ambergris lives on as a curious culinary footnote, evoking an era when extravagance meant seeking flavor in the most unexpected places, no matter how strange or rare the source. Think we left something off the list? Share your memories in the comments. We might feature them next time. Foie Gras. What kind of meal makes you feel like royalty, yet leaves a lingering question in your conscience? Foie gras once reigned on America's most elegant tables, a symbol of European sophistication placed between silver cutlery and crystal stemware. In the 1920s, it wasn't merely a dish. It was a declaration of taste and status. Served pan-seared, whipped into silky pâtés, or presented in ornate terrines, it embodied culinary indulgence at its peak. Yet the process behind its creation was steeped in debate. Traditionally produced through a technique designed to enhance the liver's richness, foie gras became the subject of growing concern among animal welfare advocates. While rooted in centuries-old methods, this approach eventually drew scrutiny from a changing public conscience. As awareness spread, the conversation intensified. Investigations and protests led several U.S. states, including New York and California, to restrict or ban its sale, reflecting a broader shift in values. Today, foie gras continues to spark discussion, praised by some chefs for its flavor and texture, challenged by others for its ethical implications. It remains a symbol of luxury, that also asks us to reflect on where indulgence meets responsibility. Whale meat. When dinner tables were ruled by scarcity instead of choice, the ocean became a fallback pantry. In the lean years of the early 20th century, especially during wartime rationing, alternative proteins emerged across American kitchens. Among them, whale meat briefly appeared as a government-endorsed solution during times of need. It wasn't limited to sailors or distant fishing cultures. It could be found in select butcher shops, public food programs, and even school cafeterias. Prepared in stews or patties, it filled a role once held by beef, offering sustenance when options were scarce. At the time, this was viewed through a lens of resourcefulness, not controversy. But as industrial whaling intensified, the global impact became impossible to ignore. Entire species were pushed toward extinction, and a once practical protein source revealed its environmental cost. By the 1970s, shifting ethics and conservation science led to strong legal protections. The U.S. passed the Marine Mammal Protection Act, effectively ending commercial whale meat consumption, except in specific indigenous contexts. Today, that chapter stands as a powerful reflection of how necessity once dictated our diets and how evolving awareness reshapes the way we view the past. Moonshine. Smoke curled through the rafters of rural barns and old cellar doors, carrying the unmistakable scent of defiance and resourcefulness. During the Prohibition era, when legal alcohol vanished from store shelves, many Americans quietly found another way. Moonshine, homemade and unregulated, emerged not just as a drink, but as a symbol of survival. In regions where cash was scarce and skepticism toward authority ran deep, age-old distilling techniques passed through generations in hushed conversations and weathered notebooks. Cornmeal, sugar, water, and yeast were combined with care, turning into more than a simple spirit. They became a form of currency, resilience, and cultural identity. Stored in mason jars, hidden in forest hollows, and traded within communities, moonshine represented ingenuity during difficult times. It found its way into recipes, remedies, and local economies. But with that ingenuity came risk. Improper distillation and makeshift equipment sometimes led to dangerous results, raising public health concerns and drawing the attention of law enforcement. Eventually, crackdowns and changing laws brought an end to many of these underground operations. Still, the legacy of moonshine lingers in family stories, regional pride, and the enduring image of backwoods stills glowing in the twilight. It remains a complex chapter in American history where necessity, tradition, and rebellion flowed together, drop by drop. Home butchering. Did your grandpa ever talk about raising a hog from scratch, then curing bacon before the week was out? That was home butchering in its truest form, a practical, time-honored tradition that turned backyards and barns into makeshift meat shops. In early 20th century America, especially in rural towns, families didn't rely on grocery store cuts. They raised, slaughtered, and processed their own livestock, following seasonal rhythms passed down through the generations. Autumn was often hog season, marked by cool mornings, sharp knives, and sizzling cast iron by nightfall. Inside the barn, every part of the animal had its purpose. Hams were hung to cure, sausages were hand-stuffed, lard was slowly rendered, and nothing was wasted. Tattered recipe cards guided the work, each one a link to family history and survival. But as cities grew and food systems modernized, so did regulations. Concerns over spoilage, contamination, and uninspected meat led to a shift toward federally monitored facilities. By the 1950s, home butchering faded from mainstream food production, though the knowledge lingered in family stories and cellar freezers. Even today, the scent of smoked ham or fresh rendered cracklings can transport some back to a time when meat wasn't just bought, it was earned. Wild game. The scent of smoke and iron drifted from kitchen chimneys as dusk settled over the woods, where supper didn't come from a grocery shelf, but from nature itself. In the 1920s, for countless rural families, wild game wasn't a luxury. It was survival. When money ran dry and farm harvests fell short, the hunting rifle and the forest became essential parts of daily life. Meals might include squirrel slow-cooked until tender, rabbit pan-fried to crispy perfection, or raccoon carefully prepared to suit the season's flavors. Even bear meat found its way into roasts when winter grew harsh. These dishes weren't crafted for elegance. They were made to nourish, to sustain, and to honor a legacy of resilience. Skills were passed from one generation to the next: how to track, how to preserve, and most of all, how to live in tune with the land. Children didn't just learn to cook, they learned stewardship. As the years passed, however, new laws emerged to protect wildlife and safeguard public health. By the mid-20th century, regulations limited wild harvested meat to personal use, ending its sale in public markets. What was once a cornerstone of rural life became a cultural memory, now revisited in family stories, faded cookbooks, and the occasional pot of stew bubbling on a wood-fired stove. Shared not out of need, but out of reverence. If you grew up in the 1950s, you remember this. What if you could step back into a time when doors were left unlocked, milk was left on the porch, and Sunday nights meant gathering round the TV as a family? If you grew up in the 1950s, these weren't just memories, they were your everyday life. Let's take a heartfelt walk back. Drive-in restaurants. Ever wonder where freedom had a soundtrack and French fries came with friendship? In the 1950s, drive-in restaurants weren't just places to eat, they were the beating heart of teen life. As summer heat rolled in, parking lots buzzed with chrome-finned Chevys and the rhythmic clatter of roller skates on concrete. Car hops in crisp uniforms glided between cars, balancing trays of sizzling cheeseburgers, thick milkshakes, and fries so crisp you could hear the crunch. For teenagers just tasting the thrill of independence behind the wheel, these neon-lit hubs were sacred ground, part diner, part dance floor, and always full of stories waiting to unfold beneath the starlit sky. The Mickey Mouse Club. What was more exciting than hearing that cheerful jingle and seeing those big mouse ears pop up on screen right after school? When the Mickey Mouse Club first aired in 1955, it wasn't just a show. It was a daily celebration of music, friendship, and imagination. Hosted by the ever-smiling Jimmy Dodd and his band of spirited Mouseketeers like Annette Funicello and Bobby Burgess, the program filled American homes with laughter and heart. With themed weekdays and catchy songs, it gave kids something to look forward to, day after day. For many, it wasn't just television. It was childhood in motion. Drive-in movies and ice cream trucks. Warm summer nights once shimmered with headlights and laughter as families rolled into drive-in theaters beneath a canvas of stars. Engines hushed, windows down, and radios softly humming. They settled in with popcorn and pajamas, ready for Hollywood magic to flicker across giant outdoor screens. Just as unforgettable was the sweet thrill of the ice cream truck's jingle drifting through quiet suburban streets. Often a good humor or Mr. Softy truck, it was more than dessert. It was a ritual. Barefoot kids would dash inside, breathless and hopeful, clutching change in sweaty palms, chasing cones and dreams under the golden haze of dusk. Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley. The 1950s dazzled in spotlight and sequins, and no two stars burned brighter than Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley. With a whisper-soft voice and a gaze that could silence a room, Marilyn embodied Hollywood allure. Her platinum curls, red lips, and hourglass figure became the standard of cinematic beauty. Meanwhile, Elvis shook the world from the waist down. With his signature pompadour and electrifying swagger, He gave rock and roll its pulse and youth its anthem. Together, they didn't just entertain. They redefined fame. They were more than performers. They were myths in the making, icons etched into the fabric of American memory. Encyclopedia Britannica salesman. Have you ever watched knowledge arrive on your doorstep, carried not by a screen, but by a man in a neatly pressed suit with a leather-bound catalog under his arm? In the 1950s, the Encyclopedia Britannica wasn't just a set of books. It was a quiet promise of learning, ambition, and upward mobility. Sold door-to-door by well-spoken salesmen, these volumes were an investment, often paid for in monthly installments. And just as families neared the final payment, a new edition would emerge, glossier, thicker, more modern, tempting them once more. It was a ritual of progress, deeply woven into the rhythm of American aspiration. Do you have a funny story or unforgettable memory from your childhood days in the 1950s? I'd love to hear it. Polio vaccine. In a decade shadowed by the silent terror of paralysis, one scientific breakthrough offered a nation its breath back. When Dr. Jonas Salk's polio vaccine was announced in 1955, it wasn't just medicine. It was a moment of collective hope. Just 3 years earlier, over 50,000 children had fallen ill in a single summer. Playgrounds had emptied, and swimming pools had gone still. But with the vaccine's arrival came a tidal wave of relief. And soon, millions of American school children were lining up to receive it. It marked the beginning of a medical triumph and the end of a fear that had gripped a generation. Soda fountains and sock hops. There was nothing quite like the buzz of a soda fountain on a Friday night, where cherry cokes fizzed, jukeboxes crooned Elvis, and teenagers shared banana splits with wide grins and sticky fingers. These chrome-lined counters weren't just for floats, they were a front-row seat to budding crushes and teenage daydreams. And when the music followed them to the gym, out came the socks, literally. At sock hops, shoes stayed off and the rhythm kicked in. From the hand jive to the twist, these dances weren't just moves. They were freedom, rebellion, and joy, spun across a polished wooden floor under the shimmer of a disco ball. Retro merchandise. You've made it this far down memory lane, but the journey doesn't have to end here. Tucked just beyond this video is something special, a curated collection of retro-inspired treasures that echo the spirit of the 1950s. From classic designs to nostalgic keepsakes, each item was made to capture the charm and character of a bygone era. If your heart beats a little faster for Formica patterns, soda fountain fonts, or the sparkle of vintage Americana, you're going to want to take a look. Just follow the link in the description and keep the story going, one keepsake at a time. Candy culture. What's sweeter than the memory of sticky fingers, bulging pockets, and a paper sack full of penny candy from the corner store? In the magical world of 1950s childhood, candy was more than just a treat. It was a ticket to fun, fantasy, and friendship. Kids puffed on chalky candy cigarettes, crunched on Necco wafers, and sucked the fire out of atomic fireballs like tiny daredevils. Charleston chews stretched with every bite. Bazooka gum came with a comic strip, and root beer barrels rolled around in back pockets until recess. Even candy buttons clung to paper like tiny sugar jewels. Back then, one shiny coin could buy pure joy, and maybe a little mischief too. Christmas traditions and toys. There's a special kind of magic that lingers in memories of a 1950s Christmas. Soft carols on the radio, the scent of pine filling the living room, and a tree shimmering with silver tinsel that danced in the light. Families would gather to unwrap wooden toys and cast-iron train sets, their wheels clicking gently as they circled the base of the tree. Children dreamed of snow-covered hills and wooden sleds, hand-painted and passed down through generations. In those simpler times, even the smallest gift felt grand. Traditions weren't just festive, they were sacred rituals of togetherness, joy, and childlike wonder that still echo in hearts today. Department store Christmas windows. Downtown sidewalks sparkled beneath strings of colored lights, but it was the department store windows that truly stole the show. During the 1950s, places like Macy's, Lord & Taylor, and Marshall Field's turned their storefronts into enchanting holiday tableaus. Miniature trains puffed along snowy tracks, toy soldiers marched in unison, and scenes from fairy tales came to life behind glass. These weren't just displays, they were seasonal spectacles, lovingly crafted with mechanical animation and artistic flair. Families bundled in wool coats strolled past in awe, turning each visit into a treasured tradition. For many, it wasn't officially Christmas until the windows came alive. Sunday night shows. Do you remember those Sunday nights when the world seemed to slow down and the soft hum of a black and white television drew the whole family close? Back then, living rooms turned into front row seats for the Ed Sullivan Show, where stars were born and dreams felt within reach. Laughter from I Love Lucy, the whimsy of Howdy Doody, and the grit of Gunsmoke made every Sunday feel like a small celebration. As the night ended, so did the broadcast. Stations signed off with the Star-Spangled Banner, flickering into static, leaving behind the quiet comfort of shared moments and the warm glow of home. Which memory from the 1950s brings back the warmest feelings for you? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Transistor radios and rock and roll. Freedom had a new sound in the 50s, and it crackled through the speaker of a palm-sized transistor radio. Suddenly, music wasn't tied to the living room. It rode in your back pocket, blasting Chuck Berry riffs from a park bench or the bleachers behind school. These sleek, battery-powered gadgets gave teenagers their first taste of personal space, tuned not just to the latest hits, but to their very identity. Whether you were getting your ducktail trimmed at the corner barbershop or sneaking a listen under the covers, rock and roll pulsed in the background, raw, loud, and unapologetically alive. TV westerns and cowboy play. Every frontier had its legends, but in the 1950s, they came beaming through black and white television sets, six-shooters blazing and justice riding fast on horseback. Shows like Gunsmoke, The Lone Ranger, and Roy Rogers didn't just entertain, they sparked a national obsession. Boys dashed through backyards in cowboy hats and fringe vests, holsters slung low and cap guns popping, their imaginations galloping through dusty towns and outlaw hideouts. The line between screen and sidewalk blurred as playgrounds transformed into wild prairies. Fueled by the golden age of TV westerns, a generation learned to chase adventure, defend the innocent, and tip their hat like a true American hero. School picture. When was the last time you dusted off an old box of memories and stumbled upon your school picture, neatly lined up with classmates and your teacher standing proudly by your side? Back in those simpler times, picture day felt almost ceremonial. Children carefully combed their hair, wore freshly ironed clothes, and practiced their best smiles. The flash from the photographer's bulky camera captured more than just a moment. It preserved friendships, youthful innocence, and small-town charm. These treasured photographs weren't merely snapshots. They were milestones, placed carefully into albums or stored away like hidden gems, quietly waiting to spark smiles, laughter, and perhaps even a bittersweet tear of nostalgia, decades later. The Fluffernutter. Forget fancy gourmet lunches. Every kid knew the real lunchtime superstar was hidden deep within their trusty brown paper bag. The mighty Fluffernutter was the undisputed sandwich champion of school cafeterias everywhere. A sticky, sweet creation, lovingly layered with peanut butter and fluffy marshmallow cream. If your mom was feeling especially creative or health-conscious, she'd sneak in thin slices of ripe banana, adding a fruity flair to the marshmallowy delight. Half the fun was peeling your fingers apart after devouring each messy bite, savoring that sugary rush. This humble yet irresistible sandwich quickly became the iconic taste of 1950s childhood, perfectly blending nostalgia, humor, and a dash of delicious chaos. Milk delivery. In the quiet of early morning, the gentle clip-clop of the milkman's horse echoed softly down the sleepy street, blending with the rhythmic clink of glass milk bottles set carefully on each doorstep. Back then, fresh milk arrived daily, right at your front door, a simple luxury you eagerly anticipated. Occasionally, nestled among the regular deliveries, you'd find a special treat, rich, creamy chocolate milk, a delightful surprise that felt like a holiday in a bottle. These visits from the friendly milkman were more than convenience. They were comforting rituals woven gently into the tapestry of everyday life, capturing the essence of a slower, sweeter era, still cherished deeply within the heart. Church and closed stores. Did you feel it? Those quiet Sundays of the 1950s held a gentle reverence as towns across America paused for rest and reflection. Shops along Main Street closed their doors, observing the sacred rhythm of worship and tranquility. Families donned their Sunday best, filling church pews with hushed whispers and hymnals opened in humble hands. Neighbors leaned on neighbors in moments of need, knocking softly on doors to borrow sugar or milk rather than breaking the serene stillness by driving to a store. It was a day reserved for community, kindness, and the comfort of tradition, a peaceful pause from life's busy rhythms. Saddle shoes and poodle skirts. Beneath the classroom lights and soda shop jukebox glow, saddle shoes tapped out the soundtrack of 1950s teen life. Sleek with their signature black and white contrast, they were polished to perfection and often worn with bobby socks for an extra pop of charm. But it was the poodle skirt that truly stole the spotlight. A swirl of colorful felt, cinched at the waist and embroidered with playful designs like leaping poodles or swinging records. These full-circle skirts moved with rhythm and grace, echoing the joyful energy of sock hops and school dances. Together, they defined an era of youthful flair, turning everyday sidewalks into runways of mid-century style. Home sewing and handmade clothes. The gentle hum of a Singer sewing machine was once the heartbeat of many American homes. In the 1950s, with store-bought fashion still a luxury for many, mothers across the country lovingly stitched clothing for their families at the kitchen table. Patterns were pinned, fabrics carefully cut, and hems sewn with care, each garment a product of both necessity and devotion. Home sewing wasn't just a practical skill, it was a labor of love passed down through generations, often inspired by colorful McCalls or simplicity patterns. From Sunday dresses to play shorts, these handmade clothes held warmth that no store tag could replicate. And in every stitch lived a story of patience, creativity, and quiet maternal pride. If you're still watching right now, comment yes, so we know you're with us. Rotary phones. Can you still hear the gentle click, click, click of the rotary dial turning under your fingertips? In the 1950s, that familiar sound marked the start of every phone call, often from the one and only phone in the house, usually parked on a hallway table or kitchen counter. For many, it wasn't even private. Party lines were common, meaning you might lift the receiver only to overhear your neighbor's conversation. Calling a friend or local shop meant flipping through thick, dog-eared pages of the household phone book. But despite its limitations, that rotary phone connected families, carried teenage giggles, and brought news from miles away, all at a pace that felt more human, more deliberate, and somehow more meaningful. Outdoor adventures. Nothing beat the thrill of flying down the sidewalk on your bike, baseball card fluttering in the spokes, sounding like a mini motorcycle as you ruled the block. Childhood in the 1950s was lived outdoors, barefoot, sun-kissed, and joyfully loud. We played kick the can until the streetlights came on, climbed trees like little explorers, and turned empty lots into imaginary kingdoms. When we weren't outside, we were building Lincoln log cabins or molding bright blobs of Play-Doh into masterpieces. Hula hoops spun around our waists, and Mr. Potato Head always wore a goofy grin. Indoors, Scrabble battles and old maid giggles filled the room. It was a golden age of simple toys, endless imagination, and pure, unfiltered fun. Western Flyer bicycles. Few childhood memories shine brighter than the day you first rode your very own Western Flyer. With its chrome fenders gleaming in the sun and sturdy steel frame humming over sidewalks, this bike wasn't just a gift. It was a passport to freedom. Sold by Western Auto and crafted by trusted American manufacturers like Murray and Huffy, the Western Flyer combined style, durability, and affordability. For countless kids in the 1950s, it marked a rite of passage, often appearing beside the Christmas tree with a big red bow. Whether racing friends, running errands, or simply exploring the block, the Western Flyer became a beloved companion on countless two-wheeled adventures that defined the golden age of growing up. Radio flyer wagons and roller skates. What if your first taste of freedom came not from a car, but from 4 squeaky wheels and a red metal wagon? In the 1950s, the radio flyer wasn't just a toy. It was a childhood workhorse, ready to haul soda bottles, little brothers, or a load of dreams. Kids zoomed down sidewalks like mini delivery drivers, inventing jobs and adventures on the fly. And then there were those clunky metal roller skates with the adjustable key, tightened over keds and often followed by a tumble or two. You could spot a true skate veteran by the band-aids on their knees. Whether you were gliding, clattering, or coasting, wheels meant one thing: you ruled your block. Mail order catalogs. Is there anything more magical than flipping through a dog-eared Christmas catalog on a chilly afternoon, dreaming with every turned page? In the 1950s, America, mail order catalogs from Sears, J.C. Penney, and Montgomery Ward weren't just shopping tools, they were windows into wonder. With vibrant illustrations and glossy pages, these seasonal books brought the spirit of the holidays right to your doorstep, especially for rural families far from department stores. Children eagerly circled toys, board games, and bicycles in bold red pen, their imaginations running wild. Year after year, those catalogs became part of the holiday ritual, symbols of hope, excitement, and the simple joy of wishing. If this video brought back memories, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more trips down memory lane. S&H green stamps. Nothing brought a family together quite like spreading out a pile of S&H green stamps across the kitchen table. Earned with every grocery run or fill-up at the gas station, these little green rewards were carefully licked, stuck into booklets, and counted with pride. Kids often helped their parents paste each one in, dreaming of the day the book would be full. Then came the fun part, flipping through colorful catalogs to pick out something special, maybe a new toaster or a set of dishes. It wasn't just about the free stuff. It was about working toward a goal, together, one stamp at a time, with patience, laughter, and shared excitement. Gold bond stamps. Back in the 1950s, it wasn't just groceries that families brought home from the store. It was anticipation, neatly stacked in tiny golden stamps. Gold bond stamps were more than a rewards program. They were a ritual. After every shopping trip or gas station stop, moms would hand over the day's bounty of stamps, and kids eagerly took their places at the kitchen table. With tongues out and booklets open, they'd help paste each one in, dreaming of the toaster, the toy, or the new set of dishes waiting at the end. It was slow, simple magic, one stamp at a time, with mom by your side and hope in every page. 1950s, family roles. Can you still picture the quiet rhythm of a 1950s morning, the scent of coffee, the hum of a radio, and the sound of Dad's footsteps as he left for work in the family's lone car. Life back then followed a familiar and comforting pattern. Fathers were often the sole breadwinners, heading off to the office or the factory, while mothers tended the home with steady hands, cooking meals from scratch, folding laundry, and minding the children with love and patience. Though idealized on TV, this domestic routine was very real for many families. It brought a sense of order and warmth that shaped childhoods, dinner tables, and the very rhythm of post-war American life. Mimeographs and beauty gadgets. Few things say 1950s like the scent of freshly cranked mimeograph ink drifting through a classroom on test day, its lavender hue and oily aroma etched into the memory of every school kid. Back then, teachers relied on these hand-cranked machines to churn out worksheets one turn at a time. Meanwhile, in the realm of beauty and wellness, women stepped into vibrating belt machines that claimed to melt away inches with a jiggly promise. These curious contraptions, part science fiction, part salon novelty, offered hope wrapped in elastic straps. Though the belts eventually fell out of fashion, they remain a quirky reminder of a decade filled with wild ideas, mechanical wonders, and the ever-present desire for self-improvement. Hobby shops. Have you ever felt the quiet thrill of entering a shop where every shelf seemed to whisper a new adventure? In the 1950s, weekend visits to the local hobby shop were a cherished ritual for countless American kids. These cozy little stores offered more than just toys. They were packed with Lionel train sets, towers of model kits, balsa wood gliders, tiny paint pots, and stacks of comic books. With just a bit of pocket change, you could walk out with a world of possibility in your hands. Whether it was crafting a miniature plane or carefully assembling a battleship, these moments stirred young imaginations and inspired the kind of focused joy only a Saturday afternoon could bring. Weekly readers in school. Friday afternoons brought a special kind of excitement to classrooms across America as teachers passed out copies of My Weekly Reader, fresh off the press. This beloved educational newspaper opened windows to the world, captivating students with lively articles, fun puzzles, and delightful cartoons. More than simply reading practice, these little newspapers encouraged kids to dream bigger, teaching them about fascinating places, historic events, and current affairs, carefully crafted to educate without overwhelming young readers. With each flip of the crisp pages and that unmistakable smell of newsprint, children felt connected to a broader world, their imaginations and curiosity expanding, leaving lasting memories that still bring a nostalgic smile today. The Fuller Brush Man. Back in the days when doors were left unlocked and front porches saw friendly faces daily, the arrival of the Fuller Brush Man felt as familiar as the morning paper. With a crisp smile and a case full of bristled wonders, he wasn't just selling cleaning tools. He was part of a traveling tradition. These gentlemen, often dressed neatly and armed with free sample brushes, knew every crack in the sidewalk of their route and could polish a stove or a sink with practiced flair. Housewives trusted them, kids watched in awe, and homes gleamed just a little brighter. In many ways, the Fuller Brush Man swept his way into American folklore, one doorstep at a time. Did this bring back great memories? Let us know by commenting nostalgia. Davy Crockett and coonskin caps. What happens when a television series turns an American folk hero into the ultimate childhood role model? In the mid-1950s, Davy Crockett fever swept across the nation like a wildfire. Thanks to Walt Disney's wildly popular miniseries, kids from coast to coast donned coonskin caps and transformed their backyards into the untamed frontier. Fess Parker's portrayal of the legendary frontiersman ignited imaginations and inspired playground expeditions into make-believe wilderness. Whether reenacting heroic battles or humming the Ballad of Davy Crockett, children found freedom, grit, and wonder in Crockett's wild spirit. It was more than just dress-up. It was a rite of passage, stitched into the cultural fabric of 1950s America. 3D comics. On gray, drizzly afternoons, something extraordinary would happen with just the flick of a comic book cover. In the 1950s, a wave of wonder swept through American homes as 3D comics burst onto the scene, turning rainy day boredom into a dazzling escape. Titles like Mighty Mouse leapt off the pages, literally, thanks to space-age red and blue glasses tucked inside. These weren't just stories. They were adventures that danced off the paper and into your imagination. Developed by artists like Joe Kubert, this brief yet brilliant trend enchanted children, blending mid-century innovation with timeless childhood wonder. Even today, the magic of those pages still lingers, like a secret waiting to be rediscovered. Katie Keene and paper dolls. Back in the 1950s, little hands carefully cut out paper dolls while big dreams danced through young imaginations. Among the most beloved was Katie Keene, a comic book heroine who wasn't just fashionable, she defined glamour. Dubbed the Queen of Pinups, Katie graced the pages of Archie comics, dazzling fans with her charm and ever-changing wardrobe. What made her truly special, though, was the way she invited girls into her world. Readers could mail in their own outfit designs, hoping to see their creativity come to life in print. It wasn't just play. It was art, expression, and a joyful spark of inspiration that still lingers decades later. House calls. The comforting sight of the family doctor arriving at the doorstep, black medical bag in hand, was a familiar scene in many American neighborhoods during the 1950s. Particularly in small towns, doctors routinely visited their patients' homes, carefully examining the sick in the warmth of their bedrooms and prescribing treatments right at their bedside. Trusted and respected, these community physicians often became family friends, listening patiently to concerns beyond medical issues and offering reassuring advice. Although the popularity of house calls had already peaked decades earlier, these personal visits remained an essential and beloved medical practice in countless communities through the 50s, symbolizing a simpler, more intimate era of healthcare, a time when doctors knew patients by name and sometimes even accepted produce or firewood as payment. This close, compassionate relationship fostered a strong sense of security and trust, deeply cherished by those who experienced it. So much of what was once normal now feels like a glimpse into another world. Which of these surprised you most, or brought back a memory? Drop a comment below, give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what's next. Thanks for watching.